The West Mule Creek Field is in Niobrara County, Wyoming. It's been a kind of a sleeper for years. It's an adjunct field to the Mule Creek Field, which was to the south and to the east originally. And the field is the highest structural point on the that particular Allen Dome or Allen anticline, which runs north to south. So that makes it, from a trapping point of view, a pretty desirable place to be. Higher is better, almost always, as we know. The field itself, because it is so high to the surrounding areas, including the Kaiser Francis Field, which is across to the east, is very intriguing because not only is it a structure in its own right, but it lies on the feather edge of the Powder River Basin. It's on the eastern edge, and as we all know, oil migrates up dip to these basin margin or basin edges. That's one dynamic. The other dynamic is to the east. That's the Powder River is to the west. To the immediate east is the Black Hills uplift, and that also created fracturing, faulting, and fluid pathways to allow oil to migrate in from another direction, from the north and the east, to get trapped. So it's been charged, we think, pretty well from a couple different directions. The Kaiser Francis Field, which is across the valley to the immediate east of West Mule Creek, is structurally lower than West Mule is, but it has produced oil steadily since, as my understanding, the early 1950s. And it has somewhere in the neighborhood of 20, 25 producing wells right now. Most of them are probably stripper wells after this amount of time. The nice thing about Kaiser Francis is that you can look at it and tell yourself, gee, that's been producing since probably before I was born. I'm 57 now. So that's definitely return on the dollar. Talking about the Kaiser Francis Field in relation to the West Mule Creek is interesting. As we look at the situation there, it's probably some isolation going on between the two fields due to their relative location vis-a-vis the Black Hills, which is a big deformative event, created lots of fractures and faulting. The thing about the West Mule Creek Field is we have a number of stacked pay zones there. And starting with coming down at a very shallow depth, we go into the Dakota Silt, which is at about 600 6 1/4, 610. Very shallow, too shallow to be cooked out at that depth. So we know the oil, which is fine, mature oil, is coming from somewhere else. Again, that makes the case for deformation and fluid pathways, because why else would you have this fine light oil at 625 feet? Obviously, it's coming from somewhere at depth, either to the west in the Powder River or to the east. We just don't know. Below it, we get into the Fall River, which is the top of the Indian Kara group. There's 3 formations there. The Fall River has pretty good potential at West Mule Creek, and we've drilled the number 9 well in particular, had a real interesting show, and I think the number 2 well has showed oil pretty well in the Fall River. And then to date, the primary zone that everyone has been chasing in the area has been the Lakota. That's the lower member of the Indian Kara, and that's probably the bread and butter formation for the area in the greater area, and it also does a fair job at West Mule Creek. The Dakota Silt, which we just talked about, is, as we said, a producer of some relatively light oil for the area, some mature oil. The API gravity to date on that has been in the mid to high 30s, which exceeds Lakota, which is the main producing formation. So that's an interesting point. It is also getting more, it's my impression that as a target, it gets more and more popular because of its shallow depth, and it isn't a gangbusters producer, but it produces steadily. So we have to look at that as a good thing. Then moving down further still, we're in the Lakota, which is the bread and butter unit for that neck of the woods. It's probably the third or fourth biggest producer in the entire Powder River Basin. It's a good, reliable target for folks who are looking to make some oil in the Powder River. The Black Hills has an enormous influence on things because it was a positive uplift of some very old rock and created an enormous amount of deformation and faulting in the subsurface, which is, as any geologist would tell you, is a good thing because it creates fluid pathways and traps. So then it becomes a question of finding where these traps might have occurred and go hunting. But I'd say the Black Hills is probably the primary tectonic vehicle of note in the area. I think it probably means that the energy that came out of that orogeny, that building of mountains in the Black Hills, had its greatest effect, or greatest impact, probably a semicircle or a circle around the hills that would be a fairway, if you would, that would include West Mule Creek. Okay. You can go not that much further west, you lose an awful lot of elevation, and you start dropping off into the basin. West Mule Creek, you're still up in the highlands, so to speak, and that's a good thing. The Powder River Basin is deep enough at a number of levels to cook out several different kinds of families of oils. And I guess I'm not aware of any typing studies in the Powder River, but I know there have been some done, just like the Williston. And I would say that, as I mentioned previously, there are right there in West Mule Creek, we have obviously a couple different oils, species, if you will. And so that tells you right away that there's different generators out there at depth. It's a cinch to say, and I can say this with confidence, that because of the compartmentalization, because of the way those rocks line up to each other, only a fool would say that most of the oil has been pulled out of there. It's very clear to me that there's a large percentage of primary production that hasn't been touched yet.